I'm Caitlin Turner, 29 years old, and the night my parents told me I wasn't welcome in their home anymore, I stood on the porch with nothing but a suitcase and $342 to my name. By sunrise, I was holding a lottery ticket worth $37 million. They thought they were cutting me off to teach me a lesson. Instead, they opened the door to the life I was always meant to build, a life they never believed in, and one they still had no idea I now owned outright. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to start over when no one thought you could. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Minneapolis. My parents, Mark and Diane Turner, ran their home like a checklist college career 401k marriage. They weren't cruel, just structured, practical. They believed in safety and predictability, the kind you could explain on a spreadsheet. And they raised us to value the same things. My older brother Josh followed that path without hesitation. Top of his class, full scholarship, already married by 25. Me, I was the outlier. The child who preferred art supplies over algebra, who spent hours making jewelry out of wire scraps and beach glass instead of preparing for college interviews. They thought I'd grow out of it. Everybody needs a hobby, my dad would say. But hobbies don't pay the bills. The only person who didn't look at me like I was broken was my grandmother Elaine. She lived just a few miles away, but her world felt like another planet. A small cottage, messy garden, and shelves full of old books, stones, and metal tools. When I was 12, she gave me my first set of jewelry pliers. I still have them. Every Friday, we'd meet at Briar and Bean Cafe, share a cinnamon roll, and stop at the gas station for 2 lottery tickets. One for you, one for me, she'd always say. Every dream needs a little magic. When she passed, she left me the little wooden box her husband had once given her, filled with stones, old chains polishing cloths, and a worn notebook full of lottery number combinations she'd played for years. She wrote inside the cover, "Keep playing and keep creating. The world needs more beauty." After college, I tried doing things their way. I took a job at a mid-tier financial firm downtown. I wore blazers. I learned to say words like synergy and pipeline with a straight face. But every night I came home and made jewelry sketching designs on sticky notes, packing orders for Etsy, posting photos online. It wasn't glamorous, but I was building something, slow and steady. By the time I was 28, I'd moved back in with my parents to save money. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could afford a small place of my own. What I didn't expect was how quickly the tension would build. Every dinner turned into a cross-examination. When are you going to get serious? You know, Josh just bought a house. Have you thought about asking Cheryl's son for a referral? He's doing great in tech sales. It didn't matter that a boutique in the city had started stocking my earrings, or that my online shop was turning a modest profit. If I couldn't explain it in benefits and base salary, it didn't count. I found a tiny studio above a bookstore downtown. Creaky floors, narrow windows, but it would have been mine. I made a plan, keep the day job a few more months, take on a few weekend markets, see if I could swing it. Grandma's voice echoed in my mind. "It's time to spread your wings, sweetheart." When I told my parents I was leaving my job to pursue jewelry full-time, I'd prepared answers. I had spreadsheets, numbers, timelines. What I hadn't prepared for was the way my dad slammed his fork down and told me I was being reckless, or the way my mom said quietly, "People with real talent don't quit their jobs." I hadn't expected to find my private sales report printed out on the kitchen counter, and I definitely hadn't expected them to admit they'd read my journal. I packed that night. 1 suitcase, 1 jewelry box, 1 notebook of Grandma's numbers. I didn't know it then, but the moment I stepped out into the rain was the exact moment the rest of my life began. The rain had started just before sunrise, soft at first, but steady enough to soak through my jacket by the time I reached the curb. My suitcase bumped along behind me, wheels catching on every crack in the sidewalk. I didn't look back. There wasn't anything to look back at. At the end of the driveway, my father stood on the porch, arms crossed, expression flat. My mother hovered just inside the doorway. Neither one moved. No hug, no offer to help. Just one last reminder from my dad. Your phone stays on the family plan until the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. Mom added Richard's son still says he could get you that interview. I nodded, didn't speak, just kept walking. I had my wallet, my license, a nearly maxed-out credit card, and $342 in cash. The car. Still in their name. I knew better than to ask for it. I tried calling Amber first. She picked up on the first ring. Kate, what's wrong? My parents kicked me out, I said. I need a place to stay. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm at the airport. Remember that conference in Phoenix? I won't be back till Sunday. Her voice cracked. Use the emergency key. It's still under the planter. Stay as long as you need. But then she remembered. Her apartment had flooded the week before. She was staying with her sister across town. I tried 3 more friends. One was out of state, one had house guests, and the other was crashing at her boyfriend's place while his parents were visiting. By the 5th call, I stopped expecting help. The rejection wasn't anyone's fault. Still, it stung. So I just kept walking. The Pinewood Motel sat a few blocks from downtown. I'd passed it 100 times, but never thought much of it. The neon sign buzzed above the door, vacancy blinking faintly in the gray morning light. I stepped inside, soaked to the skin. The woman at the front desk looked up. Her gray hair pulled into a loose bun. Her name tag read, Rebecca. "Rough day, sweetheart?" she asked, looking me over gently. "You could say that," I said. "How much for a room?" "Just for tonight. $69 plus tax," she said. "Checkout's at 11. We've got coffee in the morning." I counted out $75 and slid it across the counter. She handed me a plastic key labeled Room 4. "It's not fancy," she added, "but it's clean, and the sheets are dry." The room was small, faded wallpaper, one lamp, cracked tile in the bathroom, but it was quiet. It was mine. I peeled off my wet clothes and stepped into the shower. The water was lukewarm, but I didn't care. I sat down on the floor, knees pulled up to my chest, and let the spray wash over me. My tears mixed with the steam. Through the wall, I could hear muffled voices, Rebecca arguing with someone. "We need to pay the electric first, Donald. The credit card company can wait. If they shut off the power, we won't have any guests, Becky." I don't know why, but hearing their struggle made mine feel less lonely. Later that night, wrapped in a scratchy towel, I opened my laptop. I had just over $300 left in savings. My jewelry supplies, at least the ones I'd managed to bring, were worth maybe another $1,000. But if I sold them, there'd be nothing left of the dream. There was an email from the apartment manager, the one with the studio above the bookstore. He was looking forward to our appointment tomorrow at 3. I wouldn't be going. I opened a notebook and made a list. Find a place to stay longer than one night. Get a job that pays cash. Rebuild savings. Restart jewelry business someday. That last part was hardest to write. I climbed into bed, pulled the thin blanket over me, and stared at the ceiling. "Grandma, I'm not giving up," I whispered. "I'm just regrouping." The room was dark except for the glow of my phone charging on the nightstand. I remembered it was Tuesday night. Grandma and I always checked our lottery tickets on Tuesdays. I reached for the app, hoping for a bit of routine, some small comfort. Instead, there was a message, "System maintenance. Please check back in 6-8 hours." I set the phone down and turned toward the wall. Even that ritual had been taken from me. The alarm buzzed at 7:30. For a second, I didn't know where I was. The musty curtain, the hum of traffic outside the window, the sheets, it all felt wrong. Then I remembered. I rolled over and picked up my phone. There were a few notifications, a text from Amber probably checking in. Nothing from my parents. But then I saw it won from the lottery app. Congratulations, you've won. I almost deleted it. Figured it was one of those clickbait messages. Probably meant I'd won $2. Still, I tapped it. The screen loaded. Winning numbers 08, 17, 23, 42, 54, 49. My heart stopped. Those were Grandma's numbers, the ones she wrote in the front of the notebook, the ones I'd played every single week. I sat up straight and reached for my purse, pulled out the ticket, matched them one by one, every single number, all of them. I checked the app again. Still the same. I searched the official Powerball site. Same numbers. $94 million jackpot. Lump sum payout approx. $37 million after taxes. I couldn't move. My hands were shaking. I stared at the screen like it might disappear. I called the number listed on the lottery site. State Lottery Commission. How may I help you? I think I won, I said. I need to verify it. She took my ticket details. There was a pause, then her tone shifted. Ms. Turner, I can confirm. You're holding the winning ticket from last night's draw. Congratulations. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. Are you all right, ma'am? I don't know, I said. She talked me through the next steps. Sign the back. Call an attorney. Don't tell anyone yet. Take your time. I hung up and just sat there staring. I heard a knock. Everything okay in there, honey? It was Rebecca. I opened the door. I won, I said quietly. She looked confused. Won what? Dear, the lottery, I whispered. All of it. She stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her. You need a lawyer, I said, and a financial advisor, and I need to stay here a few more days. Quietly. She nodded. I know someone. My cousin James. He's in the city, discreet, and I'll pay for the room. In fact, I want to book the whole motel. All 15 rooms, just for the week. Rebecca blinked. That'd be about $6,000. I nodded. Good. That'll help with that electric bill, too. She didn't ask how I knew. As she stepped back into the hallway, I added one last thing. If anyone comes asking, especially a couple in their 50s, or a man who looks like me, tell them I'm not here. Rebecca gave a small smile. Your secret's safe with me. Back inside the room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone again. $37 million. It still didn't feel real. But it was. And no one, not my parents, not my brother, not anyone who doubted me, had a clue. I stayed in room 4 for 2 more nights. Rebecca made sure I had extra towels, fresh coffee, and space. No questions, no fuss, just quiet understanding. When her cousin James called the next morning, his voice was calm and professional. We scheduled a meeting at his downtown office. He didn't flinch when I walked in wearing the same jeans and cardigan I'd had on since Tuesday. James explained the process slowly, carefully. We'll set up a blind trust, he said, sliding a folder across the table. That way your name stays out of the public record, in this state that's allowed. Is that legal? I asked, already scanning the paperwork. Completely, he said. Happens more than you'd think. Smart move given your circumstances. We spent the next few hours walking through every detail, claiming the money, creating a long-term investment plan, setting aside what I'd need to live on right away. For someone in your position, he said keeping a few $100,000 liquid makes sense. The rest will work for you. The phrase "a few $100,000" landed like a wave. 2 days earlier, I was debating whether I could afford breakfast. At the end of our meeting, I asked James for one more thing. There's a motel, I said. The Pinewood. Rebecca and her husband Donald run it. I want to pay off their mortgage. Anonymously. James didn't blink. We can arrange that through the trust. That afternoon, we toured a small apartment complex near Loring Park. Nothing over the top. 2 bedrooms, a view of the skyline, and a quiet second-floor corner unit that felt safe. When the leasing agent asked about income verification, James stepped in. A cashier's check and a signed lease later, I had a new address, paid in full for the year. I bought what I needed, clothes, groceries, a basic set of furniture, no splurges. Except for one, a complete set of high-end jewelry tools and materials. I had them shipped to the apartment under my initials only. For a week, I didn't tell a soul. I needed space to breathe. I didn't want congratulations or questions, just time. Then on a Thursday morning, I walked into Carlton's Coffee and heard someone call my name. Caitlin. I turned and saw Timothy standing near the counter, coffee in hand, eyes wide. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "You've been ignoring my texts," he said. I was worried. "I changed my number," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "New phone plan." "Where have you been staying?" he asked, looking me up and down. I was wearing a soft blue blouse, new jeans, a leather watch that still had the tag tucked underneath. "I'm fine, Tim," I said. "Better than fine." "Can we sit?" he asked. We found a small table in the corner. He kept glancing at my clothes, then back at my face. "You look different," he said. "I am," I replied. "You got a new job or something like that." He hesitated. "Mom's been a wreck. Dad acts like he's not worried, but he is. They didn't expect you to actually leave. They kicked me out." "Tim," I said, "in the rain, with no backup plan. They made it clear I wasn't welcome." "I know," he said. "They handled it badly. I should have said something that night." "You didn't," I said. "You sat there and agreed with them." He looked down at his coffee. "I thought you'd cool off and come back after a day or two." I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "Tell them I'm not coming back. I'm not interested in living life on their terms anymore. They didn't mean to hurt you. They just didn't want to understand me." He was quiet for a long time. "Then you seem successful now." Like suddenly. I didn't answer. "I'm not asking for anything," he added quickly. Mom keeps saying, maybe you came into some money. She's worried, doesn't know what to think. Tell her I'm safe," I said. "That's all she needs to know." That evening, the texts started. From Dad, "Timothy said you're doing well. Let's talk." From Mom, "Please call us. We love you. We miss you." I didn't respond. Instead, I unpacked the tools that had arrived that afternoon and set them up in the second bedroom. The space felt like a real studio, natural light through the window, clean surfaces, my own timeline. 2 weeks after the win, I launched my new brand, Margaret's Legacy. I hired a photographer, a designer, and created a new website. The pieces came together fast once I had the right support. Orders started coming in, then a message from a boutique in Chicago, then another from a buyer in Los Angeles. One evening, I got a call from an unfamiliar number, Caitlin. "This is Dr. Sophia Martinez." I remembered her instantly, my old college therapist, the one I stopped seeing when my parents insisted on being involved. "How did you get my number?" I asked. "Your mother," she said. "She's worried. She's hearing rumors. Something about you coming into money. She's afraid you're in trouble." I almost laughed. "You think I'm dealing drugs?" She didn't say that exactly, but she's confused and scared. "I'm not in any kind of trouble," I said. "But thanks for checking." "Would you be open to a session?" she asked. "Just one. To talk through how you want to handle things with your family. No pressure. My treat." I hesitated, then said yes. The next morning, I sat across from Sophia in her new office. Sunlight streamed in through the window behind her. The walls were lined with books and plants. She didn't ask questions right away, just listened. I told her everything what happened the night they kicked me out, how I ended up at the motel, the numbers from Grandma's notebook, the wind, the silence that followed. When I finished, she asked me one question. "What do you want, Caitlin?" "I want respect," I said. "I want them to understand what they did, and I want to decide what happens next, not have it decided for me." "You don't owe them anything," she said gently. But if you want something real with them, anything, it's okay to expect acknowledgement, and it's okay to take your time. I nodded. I wasn't sure what the next step was, but I knew they would not be part of it until I was ready. 3 weeks after I left home, I came back from the grocery store to find both of my parents standing in the lobby of my apartment building. My mother spotted me first and rushed forward, arms out, her eyes wide and glassy. "Caitlin, thank God," she said. "We've been so worried." My father stood behind her, more reserved, taking in everything: the front desk, the polished tile floors, the doorman who gave me a respectful nod as I walked in. I didn't say anything right away. "How did you find me?" I asked. Mom glanced over her shoulder. "Timothy followed you home yesterday. We just needed to know you were okay." I looked at them both, standing there beneath the soft glow of the entryway lights. Then I glanced around at the quiet lobby, the elevator humming nearby. "As you can see," I said, "I'm okay, more than okay." They didn't know what to say to that. "Would you like to come up?" I asked. "We should talk." The apartment was clean and bright with tall windows and just enough furniture to feel lived in. They stepped inside and looked around without speaking. I waited while they took it all in. "This place must cost a fortune," Dad said finally. $3,000 a month, I told him. I paid the lease for the full year up front. Mom reached out, touching the sleeve of my sweater. "And these clothes. Caitlin, please tell us what's going on. Are you in some kind of trouble?" I motioned for them to sit on the sofa. I stayed in the armchair across from them. "You kicked me out," I said, with nothing but a suitcase and a few $100s in my wallet. They didn't argue. That same night, I continued reaching into my purse. I checked my lottery ticket. I handed the ticket to my father. It was laminated now, something I'd done the day after I filed the paperwork with James. "What's this?" he asked, looking at the numbers. "Grandma Elaine's numbers," I said. "The ones from her notebook, the ones she and I played together every week." My mom froze. "The Powerball," she said. "The one from last month," I nodded. $94 million. The lump sum payout came to $37 million after taxes. Dad stared at the ticket, his eyes narrowing, running the numbers again and again. He tried to speak, then stopped. Then tried again. "Caitlin, this is incredible." He reached for my hand, but I didn't offer it. 3 weeks ago, I said you told me my business was a fantasy, that my jewelry was just a hobby. You went through my things, read my diary, and then sent me out into the rain. "We were trying to help you," Mom said. Her voice was quiet, almost strained. "We thought you needed a push." I looked at her. Instead of support, I said, "You chose control, and now you're standing here because Timothy told you I'm doing well." Dad leaned forward. "We didn't mean for you to be homeless. We thought you'd stay with a friend, that you'd come back once things cooled off." I stood on the sidewalk that night, soaking wet, calling people who couldn't help. I walked half a mile with a suitcase through the rain. I spent the night in a motel room. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. She looked away. "We made a terrible mistake," she said. "We've been sick about it. You didn't start looking for me until you heard I might be successful," I said. "And even then, your first reaction was to show up without calling." They didn't argue. After a long pause, Dad spoke again. "What do you want from us, Caitlin?" It was the first honest question he'd asked. I took a moment, then I stood up and walked to the window before answering. "I want acknowledgement," I said, "that what you did was wrong. Not just misguided, not just tough love, but wrong. I want respect for the choices I've made, and I want it understood clearly that my money is mine alone." Mom nodded quickly. "Of course it's yours. We'd never—" "You already asked how much this apartment costs," I said, turning back to them. "And you've been looking at the label on my sweater since you walked in." They fell quiet again. After a while, Dad said, "We're very proud of you." "I'd like to believe that," I replied, but I'm not sure you know me well enough to be proud of me." I glanced at the clock, then back at them. "I'm hosting a family dinner next Saturday. Timothy's invited. You are too. If you want to try again, you can come, but it'll be on my terms." They left a few minutes later, still in a daze. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood for a long time staring at the space where they had been. Breathing felt easier. Over the next few days, I planned a menu, and made space for whatever might happen next. The following Saturday, I set the dining table early. Simple linens, fresh tulips, mismatched dishes, nothing extravagant, but it felt like me. A slow-cooked roast filled the apartment with warmth. I had a second pot of coffee ready, just in case the conversation needed softening. Timothy arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and a nervous smile. "Hope this pairs with whatever this is," he said, peeking at the roast. "Smells good, right?" I replied, handing him a corkscrew. He looked around the apartment. "You really made this place your own." I gave a small nod, then stepped away to stir the green beans. Mom and Dad arrived 10 minutes later, on time, but unsure. Dad wore a blazer. Mom brought a pie, her apple recipe, the one she always made for holidays. She held it out like an offering. "Still warm," she said. "Thank you," I said, taking it from her carefully. We sat. I served. They complimented the food. For the first few minutes, the only sounds were forks against plates and Timothy asking about the coffee. Eventually, Mom broke the silence. "This is a lovely meal, Caitlin. You've always been good in the kitchen." I nodded politely but didn't answer. The compliment landed somewhere uncertain. Timothy jumped in. "So, business is good, huh? I saw your website. Looks amazing. It's growing," I said. "I've hired 2 assistants." "That's impressive," he added, "especially for just a couple weeks in." Dad cleared his throat. "And the storefront downtown." "That's yours too." I nodded. "Lease signed last week." He leaned forward slightly. "I assume you're tracking expenses carefully. Inventory, overhead marketing." "I'm managing it," I said, "with help." The conversation stayed light after that. Mom brought out the pie. I made tea. No one brought up the lottery directly, though the topic circled the edge of every sentence. After they left, Timothy lingered behind to help with dishes. He didn't say much, just stood at the sink rinsing plates while I dried them. "You know," he said, "for what it's worth, I think they're trying. They're just slow to catch up." "Trying isn't the same as understanding," I said. "I know," he replied, "but maybe they're learning." Over the next month, things did start to shift. The boutique orders increased. A small gallery in Seattle reached out. I held back from doing anything flashy. No headlines, no interviews, just steady work. I met with James every other week, reviewing the financial plan. He never pushed, just offered suggestions and listened when I had questions. When I brought up the Pinewood Motel, he smiled. "Mortgage paperwork is complete. The account will reflect 0 balance by Monday." I stopped by to see Rebecca and Donald a few days later. She met me in the lobby with a stack of towels in her arms. We got a letter, she said, her eyes shining. From the bank, said we were clear, no explanation, just paid in full. I didn't say anything. She looked at me for a long moment, then gave a quiet nod. I figured she said, "Thank you. You gave me a place when I had no one else," I replied. "You didn't ask questions. That's what people do," she said. "At least it's what they should do." Back in the city, I finalized the paperwork for the foundation. We called it the Margaret Wilson Fund in memory of Grandma Elaine's maiden name. Its focus was simple support young artists and makers who didn't have family backing. Grants, scholarships, emergency housing if needed. Within the first 2 weeks, we funded 6 small projects. 2 painters, a ceramicist, a violin student, and a pair of sisters starting a handmade quilt business. The storefront opened quietly, no ribbon cutting. I painted the door frame myself. On the glass in gold lettering, it read, "Margaret's Legacy Handcrafted Jewelry and Design." I kept my tools in the back. The front room stayed tidy with soft lighting and calm music. I brought in my first assistant, Nina, a recent art school grad who was working nights at a diner. A week later, I hired Will, who had been making wire sculptures in a shared studio across town. One Thursday night, I attended a local charity auction hosted by a gallery downtown. I donated one of my pieces for the silent bidding, a lapis pendant set in brushed silver. Near the end of the evening, a man approached me at the wine table. "I think I just bid on something you made," he said, holding a folded catalog. "Ocean, something ocean memory," I said. "Blue stones oval pendant." "That's the one," he said, smiling. "It reminded me of Maine. My family used to vacation there when I was a kid. We talked for a few minutes about coastal towns and quiet places. His name was Michael. He worked in interior design. We agreed to meet for coffee the following week. Our first date was tacos at a food truck near the lake. Nothing fancy, just simple and easy. On our third date, I told him about the lottery. He paused for a second, then said, "Well, that explains the parking spot in a secured garage." I laughed. He didn't ask for details. "I like what you're doing with it," he added. "Not everyone would. We didn't talk much more about it. Just move forward one step at a time." By mid-fall, the foundation had helped 14 artists. The storefront had steady traffic. Online orders kept coming. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anything. I had what I needed. I had space to build something real. Then came Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving came with clear skies and a light breeze that carried the scent of roasted turkey down the hallway from my kitchen. The dining table was set with calm autumn colors, nothing showy, just small pumpkins, cloth napkins, and the quiet hum of jazz from the speaker tucked behind a houseplant. I'd spent most of the morning in the kitchen. The roast turkey was resting on the counter. Sweet potatoes baked with cinnamon and pecans were cooling near the window. My grandmother's green bean recipe simmered on the stove, the one she always made in the same dented pan. It was my first holiday hosting. The apartment finally felt like home. Mom arrived first, balancing a warm pie dish wrapped in foil. "Apple," she said as she handed it to me. "I remembered you always liked it with extra cinnamon." I nodded and placed it beside the other desserts. "Thank you." She looked around the apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. "This space suits you," she said. "It's peaceful." Dad followed behind her, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider and a bag with cloth-wrapped dishes. "I brought the rolls," he said, setting them on the kitchen counter. They didn't ask what else I had prepared. They didn't comment on the size of the space or the view from the windows. They just moved through the room quietly, with careful steps. Timothy came last hand in hand with a woman I hadn't met before. "This is Lisa," he said. "She's a painter. We met at one of your foundation events." Lisa smiled and offered a bottle of wine. "Thank you for having me." "Glad you're here," I said, motioning them toward the living room. "Make yourselves at home." Dinner was steady and quiet, the kind of conversation that fills a table without taking up too much space. Lisa asked questions about my jewelry. Mom complimented the tablecloth. Dad talked about a client who'd recently retired and moved to Arizona. At one point, I caught Mom watching me from across the table. She didn't look away when I noticed. She just held my gaze, then gave a small nod. It wasn't dramatic, just steady. After dinner, while the others moved into the living room for dessert, she followed me into the kitchen and began rinsing dishes at the sink. "Need help?" she asked. I passed her a towel. "You can dry." We worked in silence for a few minutes, just the sound of water and dishes and the occasional clink of silverware. "I was wrong," she said finally, still facing the sink, "about how I handled things. I didn't respond right away. I didn't understand what you were building," she continued, "or who you were trying to be, and I'm sorry we couldn't see it before." She handed me a plate and met my eyes. "Your grandmother would be proud, not because of the money, but because you stayed true to yourself." I nodded, setting the plate aside. "Sometimes I feel her here. She believed in you," Mom said. "She always did." I didn't say anything more. We finished the rest of the dishes in quiet rhythm, just the two of us. Later, as everyone was putting on coats and gathering leftovers, Dad stepped into the studio room off the hallway. He looked around slowly, taking in the workbenches, the finished pieces, the small framed photo of Grandma Elaine on the shelf near the window. He picked up one of the necklaces resting on a velvet tray. "Your mother was wearing one like this tonight," he said, "with the blue stones. It's called Ocean Memory," I said. "The stones are lapis lazuli." He turned it over gently, inspecting the clasp. "It's beautiful," he said. "Truly. I never really looked before." I nodded once. "Thank you." He set it down carefully. "Maybe next time you'll show me how it's made." "I'd like that," I said. They left a few minutes later, Mom with the empty pie dish, Dad carrying the extra rolls, Timothy and Lisa walking side by side toward the elevator. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the hallway and let the quiet settle. No noise, no tension. Not everything had been said. Not everything was fixed. But something had shifted. 1 year after that night in the rain, I stood in the center of my jewelry gallery as the final pieces were adjusted under the lights. The grand opening was in less than an hour, and everything was ready. Walls painted soft gray glass cases arranged with my first complete collection, and a small brass plaque at the front entrance that read, "Margaret's Legacy." Outside, a quiet line had started to form. Some were friends, others customers from my online shop, and a few names I recognized from gallery circles. Michael arrived first. He wore a navy jacket and carried a tray of pastries from the cafe where we'd had our second date. "These go with your fancy sparkling water, right?" he asked, setting the tray beside the coffee urn. "They'll do just fine," I said, smiling. As guests began to filter in, I moved between conversations, answering questions about the materials, explaining the meaning behind certain designs, guiding people gently from one case to the next. Timothy arrived with Lisa not long after. She wore one of my earlier pieces, a simple copper pendant with a rose quartz center, and introduced me to a small group of painters she'd brought along. "They all applied for grants this spring," she said. "2 already got funding." "Glad you're here," I told them. And I meant it. Rebecca and Donald came in just before 7. I'd invited them personally and left a note with their RSVP dress, however you like. There's no dress code. Donald wore his best flannel shirt. Rebecca brought a small bouquet from the garden behind the pine wood. "You did good, sweetheart," she said, tucking the stems into my hand. They didn't stay long, just enough to walk through, see the studio space in back, and take one of the gift bags on the way out. My parents came later. Not late, just not early. Mom wore a navy sweater set and a brooch I'd made her for her birthday. Dad had on his usual sport coat this time, paired with dark jeans instead of pressed slacks. Michael greeted them first, offering cider, and pointing them toward the display that featured the Ocean Memory line. They listened while he talked, nodded when appropriate, and didn't interrupt. After a while, I noticed Dad standing near the refreshment table talking quietly with a couple from the Arts Council. He wasn't pitching anything, just asking questions. Mom spent most of the night watching people move through the space, occasionally drifting near me without hovering. At one point, she stopped beside a case that held the lapis set I'd worn to that first auction. She turned to me and said softly, "You know, I used to think it was about money, making sure you could support yourself. But this," she motioned toward the gallery, "this is something else. This is yours." I nodded. She didn't say more, and I didn't need her to. The event wrapped up slowly, one conversation at a time. People lingered in the hallway, held their coats in their arms, instead of putting them on right away, sipped the last of the cider. By 10, the lights were dimmed, the doors locked, and the gallery was quiet again. Michael stayed behind to help me tidy up. We moved in sync, stacking chairs, sealing pastry containers, wiping down glass. When the space was clear, I walked through it again, just me and the quiet hum of the heater kicking on. I paused at each case, touching the corners, adjusting a necklace that had tilted during the evening. Michael joined me near the back wall, wrapping his arms around me gently. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. "I was just thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't bought that lottery ticket," I said. "If I hadn't played Grandma's numbers that night." "You'd still be here," he said without hesitation. "Might have taken longer, but you'd have made it. You already knew what you wanted to build." I didn't answer right away. I just let the quiet settle. Because he was right. Michael and I stood in the quiet gallery for a long while after the last light was turned off. The hum of the city just outside the glass doors reminded me how far I'd come from that motel room on the edge of downtown. The same hands that had once shaped wire and broken beads by lamplight were now building something that would outlast me. I thought about Grandma Elaine, her book of numbers, her steady belief in the things you could only feel but never quite prove. She didn't leave behind a fortune. She left me something better, the courage to trust my own vision, even when no one else could see it. The money changed a lot, yes, but it didn't build the business. It didn't design the collections. It didn't heal the fractures in my family. What it gave me was time and space and the power to stop asking for permission. By spring, Margaret's legacy was in 3 galleries across the country. The foundation had funded nearly 30 artists. Some had started their own ventures, tiny studios, co-ops, weekend markets. Others just needed enough support to stay afloat one more month. The Pinewood Motel was now an artist's retreat. Rebecca and Donald had painted the doors in soft coastal colors and converted 2 rooms into shared workshop space. I visited once in a while just to sit on the porch and drink their weak coffee with too much cream. Mom started taking pottery classes on Thursdays. She didn't talk about it much, but she brought me a bowl one weekend, uneven glazed in a pale green that pooled in the center. She said it was a practice piece, but I placed it on the shelf near the front door. It holds my keys. Dad still asked questions sometimes about taxes, inventory margins, but he asked them differently now. Not as challenges, but out of curiosity. And sometimes he stopped halfway through a sentence, thought for a moment, and changed the subject. Timothy helped me restructure the foundation's grant cycle. His girlfriend Lisa now taught workshops in the back room of my studio every second Saturday. I didn't tell everyone my story. Most customers never knew I'd once slept in a motel bed with $20 left in my pocket. They just saw the work bracelets etched with tiny constellations, earrings shaped like waves, necklaces strung with stones I picked out one by one. But every so often someone would ask, "How did you get started?" And if the moment felt right, I'd tell them I lost everything in a single night. And in that same night, the world handed me everything I'd need to begin again. The real shift didn't come from the check. It came from the quiet days that followed the ones where I chose to build something with it. Sometimes justice doesn't show up with a bang. Sometimes it slips in quietly while you're working, while you're healing, while you're choosing to keep going, even after the door's been slammed behind you. And when it comes, it doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like peace, like respect, like coming home to a life you created with your own 2 hands. So if you're listening to this and wondering if it's too late to start again, or too foolish to hold on to a dream no one else believes in, just know this: you might be one quiet morning away from everything changing. And when it does, it won't make you someone new. It'll just give you permission to be who you've been all along. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to know. Leave a comment or share it with someone who might need it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're always welcome here. Thanks for staying with me, and take good care.